When my grandmother passed away, she left me her old house in Willow Springs. It was a weathered, creaky home nestled at the edge of a thick forest, and though I hadn't visited it since I was a child, I remembered its eerie charm. I also remembered the attic, a place my grandmother always told me never to enter. After her funeral, I moved into the house temporarily to settle her affairs. The place was filled with dusty antiques and relics from another era. Among the many objects she'd collected was an old, porcelain doll. It sat in a high-backed rocking chair in the living room, its eyes a piercing blue that seemed to follow me no matter where I moved. The doll wore a lace dress, yellowed with age, and had a chipped cheek that made it look perpetually sad. I should have thrown it away the first time I saw it. The first night in the house was quiet, though the silence itself felt oppressive. As I lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, I heard a faint creaking from downstairs. It wasn't unusual for an old house like this to groan, but this sound was rhythmic, like the rocking of a chair. I dismissed it as my imagination. After all, I hadn't been back here since I was 10, and the house had always given me the creeps. The next morning, as I was sorting through boxes, I found a journal that belonged to my grandmother. The pages were filled with entries about her day-to-day life, but one particular passage caught my eye. She knows too much. I've hidden her upstairs where she can't see me anymore. But I still feel her watching. Always watching. I closed the journal, unease curling in my stomach. Was my grandmother talking about the doll? I glanced at the living room. The doll's head was tilted slightly to the side, its glassy eyes staring directly at me. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I heard it again, the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair. But this time, there was something else, a whisper. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering in my chest. It was faint, barely audible, but I was sure I'd heard it. "Kim," the voice repeated, closer this time. I bolted out of bed and ran downstairs. The living room was empty, but the rocking chair was moving, its motion slow and deliberate. The doll sat perfectly still, its lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I decided to put the doll in the attic. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away because it felt wrong somehow, but I didn't want it anywhere near me. The attic was as unsettling as I remembered. It was filled with cobwebs and old furniture, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. I placed the doll in a trunk and slammed the lid shut, shoving it into a corner. As I turned to leave, I felt a cold breeze brush against my neck. The attic window was closed. That night, I decided to read more of my grandmother's journal. The entries grew increasingly strange. She whispers things I've never told anyone. She knows what happened to Lily. She knows I lied. Lily was my grandmother's younger sister, who had disappeared when they were children. The family had always assumed she ran away, but no one ever found her. I told her to keep her secrets, but she won't stop. She says she'll tell everyone if I don't listen. I slammed the journal shut, a chill running down my spine. The following morning, I found the doll sitting in its chair in the living room. My blood ran cold. I was sure I'd left it in the attic, locked in that trunk. But here it was, its head tilted slightly as if mocking me. "How did you get here?" I whispered, as though expecting an answer. That night, the whispers returned. "You can't hide from me, Kim." I sat upright in bed, my breath catching in my throat. The voice was clear now, no longer faint or distant. "You lied to him. You lied to Michael." My stomach dropped. Michael had been my ex-boyfriend, someone I'd hurt deeply by keeping secrets I wasn't proud of. But how could this voice know that? I decided to destroy the doll. I grabbed it from the chair and carried it outside to the fire pit in the backyard. The flames roared to life, licking hungrily at the doll's porcelain face. For a moment, I felt relief. But then I heard it, a scream so shrill and inhuman that it made my ears ring. The flames died instantly, and the doll sat unharmed in the ashes, its glassy eyes staring up at me. That night was the worst yet. The whispers turned into shouts, accusing me of every sin I'd ever committed. You stole that money from your coworker. You lied to your mother about where you were that night. You were happy when your father died. I covered my ears, but the accusations grew louder until they became a deafening roar. Desperate, I returned to the attic. There, I found the trunk where I had placed the doll. The lid was open, and inside was a small, child-sized skeleton. My hands trembled as I pieced it together. Lily hadn't run away. My grandmother had killed her and hidden her body in the trunk. The doll had been trying to tell me the truth all along. That night, I confronted the doll. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. The room grew cold, and the doll's head turned slowly to face me. "Justice," it whispered. I understood then. My grandmother's sins had bound the doll to this house, but it wasn't just her guilt keeping it here, it was mine too. I had to confess. The next morning, I went to the police and told them everything. They excavated the attic and found Lily's remains, as well as other skeletons buried in the yard. My grandmother had been a monster, and the doll had made sure her secrets wouldn't stay buried. When I returned to the house that evening, the doll was gone. Its chair sat empty, the room silent. I moved out the next day, but I still feel its presence sometimes. In my dreams, I see those piercing blue eyes, watching, waiting. Because I know I still have secrets left to tell. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share for more chilling tales.